The state of global power in the early 18th century is best understood through the raw intelligence reaching local ports on a single day. This is a surviving broadside from a colonial printing press, the American Weekly Mercury, dated Thursday, August 31st, 1721. This single document captures a world in profound transition, where systemic shocks collided with geopolitical stabilization. It maps the vulnerabilities of 1721 as reported, before they were sanitized by later historians. Embedded in these columns are primary accounts of a papal death in Rome, a massive corporate fraud in London, a bubonic plague sweeping across France, and a surprisingly polite pirate encounter in the Caribbean. By isolating this specific cross-section of time, we can observe how the era's political and economic systems actually functioned under pressure. The briefing begins with a dispatch out of Rome, dated April 2nd. It reports the death of the 72-year-old Pope, John Francis Albani, known as Clement XI. The paper characterizes the late pontiff directly, describing a leader who affected peace, but notes he was naturally timorous. His death triggers a highly regimented transfer of power. The text outlines the exact sequence. It begins the moment the cardinal nephew delivers the Pope's seal ring to the master of his household, followed immediately by the tolling of the great bell of the capital. The transition immediately alters the civic reality of Rome. To manage public order during the vacancy, the city's jails are opened, setting prisoners at full liberty. The physical preparation is equally strict. The body is disemboweled, embalmed, and placed under heavy guard. It is then moved to the chapel for viewing, where an almost infinite number of females paid respects by kissing his feet through a grated door. Absolute authority in the early 18th century was fragile. To prevent political collapse before the cardinals could seal the conclave and elect a successor, the Vatican required intense, highly choreographed physical pageantry to project continuity. Moving across the Channel, a dispatch out of London reports the finalized peace treaty between Great Britain and Spain. The treaty secures major strategic gains for the British Empire. England secures permanent control over Gibraltar and Port Mahon, and critically, expanded trade access to the Spanish West Indies. Spain is required to pay restitution amounting to upwards of 6 million of pieces of eight. The Mercury notes these funds are reparations for specific damage sustained by the Royal George, a vessel belonging to the South Sea Company. The immediate consequence is mobilization. Orders are swiftly issued for the Great South Sea ship to prepare for a voyage to New Spain. Yet in the exact same column, the narrative shifts. The very company benefiting from this sovereign treaty is collapsing under the weight of a domestic scandal. Parliament's secret committee uncovers massive corporate fraud at the center of the South Sea operation. The methods are brazen, a surprising account of altered names, erased loans, and pages physically torn out of the company ledgers. But the parliamentary inquiry hits a wall. The investigation is forced to a halt because one key individual is missing. The text identifies him as Mr. Knight, the operative who appears to have been principally entrusted with executing this black and destructive South Sea scheme. This reveals a contradiction in the 18th century imperial framework. The British state could extract millions in sovereign treaties, yet lacked the internal capacity to prosecute the architects of its own domestic financial ruin. The briefing then shifts to a June 24th report, outlining a biological crisis expanding across the European mainland. A severe outbreak of the bubonic plague is spreading in a very dreadful manner throughout the regions of Provence and Toulon. The primary source describes entire populations, men, women, and children, succumbing to the disease, generating a state of most terrible consternation across France. This disaster compounds an ongoing macroeconomic collapse. The dispatch notes France is in a miserable condition, with government paper bills selling at an 85% discount. Meanwhile, updates from the European periphery highlight ongoing diplomatic maneuvers, noting that plenipotentiaries from Sweden and Muscovy are meeting in Finland to negotiate peace. Simultaneously, a military buildup is accelerating in the Mediterranean, with Turkish, Venetian, and Dutch forces arming against the Algerines. These dispatches map a continent locked in a state of overlapping crises. European states were fighting an existential biological threat while maneuvering for regional military dominance. Finally, the broadside shifts focus across the Atlantic to maritime news from a dispatch out of New York. Off the coast of Barbados, a colonial ship is intercepted by a heavily armed 24-gun pirate vessel that had traveled from the coast of Guinea. The newspaper records an anomaly. The pirates treated their captives very civilly. They did not plunder the colonial ship for wealth. They only seized provisions, citing that necessity constrained them to do so. The pirates then attempt an unusual diplomatic maneuver. They send a message to the colonial government of Barbados, offering a conditional surrender. Their terms are specific. They agree to surrender to the king's mercy, provided they are allowed to retain their prisoners until the king's official pleasure is known. Faced with this offer, the colonial government is paralyzed. They send absolutely no answer to the pirate vessel. Receiving silence from the authorities, the outlaws simply abandon the negotiation and sail away. This maritime anomaly shows how imperial authority degraded over distance. The laws of European monarchs were often replaced by localized realities on the colonial frontier, resulting in armed outlaws attempting diplomacy while local governments froze in inaction. When we pull back from the individual dispatches, the broadside functions as a single ledger of a volatile era. August 31, 1721, represents a cross-section of early 18th century global friction. The text captures high-level stabilization efforts, like international treaties and papal successions, happening alongside uncontrollable systemic chaos, driven by corporate fraud, bubonic plague, and maritime piracy. History recorded as it happens is rarely a clean narrative. It is a collision of untidy and simultaneous events. The Mercury broadside provides a rigorous, unvarnished window into the geopolitical, economic, and biological reality of 1721.
The Daily Dispatch, history in print. No modern gloss, no modern hint. Just black and white, and read today. The Daily Dispatch.